Thank you for listening to the Black and Gold Hockey Podcast. Please support the show by subscribing to and leaving a 5-star rating for the show on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Podbean, SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher, and any of your favorite podcast platforms. You can also support the show by going to our website, blackandgoldhockey.com, where there's always exciting articles by the B&G writing staff. While you're there, don't forget to click on the fanatics.com banner for a great sports fan shopping experience.
Hey, you done yet? We gotta start the show.
Behind the net to Sanderson, Orr! Bobby Orr! Scores for the Boston Bruins!
30 seconds left in the period. The Bruins are shorthanded. Ray Bourque from the face-off circle to the right of Reggie Whitman. Fired it down, and Whitmore blew it.
Did he ever?
To Bergeron on the drive, save, rebound, he's loose. Sagan kicks him loose. Bergeron scores! Patrice Bergeron with the point of the dagger in their throats. They rip it out of Toronto's hands and kill the beast. The Boston Bruins have won it after being 3 down in the third.
Welcome to the Black and Gold Hockey Podcast, episode number 197, presented by the Black and Gold Productions Sports Media Company. It is October the 4th, 2020. The Black and Gold Hockey Podcast is brought to you by Bet Online. Visit betonline.ag and use code CLNS50. I am your host, Matt Barry, and I'm joined each week by Heather Ingerson. Hello, Heather.
Hello, Matt.
And Mark Allred. Hello, Mark.
Matt, what's up? And congratulations on kicking me to the curb and being the new lead host of the Black and Gold Hockey Podcast.
Oh, really appreciate it. Really love being here. Exciting episode for my first one as a host. As coming to you this week, we have a special guest. It's from the draftanalyst.com. NHL draft guru Steve Kournianos will join us a little bit later to talk Bruins and who they may be targeting in this upcoming draft. But first, Mark has a word for us today.
I do, and we're going to talk about show sponsor betonline.ag. The NHL might be over during the second off season of 2020, which is kind of weird to say. But there's Major League Baseball, the NBA, there's golf, UFC, and so many other sports are going on. But football's back. You might not be at the game this year, but you can still be in on the action at betonline.ag. BetOnline.ag is going the extra mile to make sure you get in on everything imaginable this season. From game spreads and totals to teams, players, and coaching props, BetOnline.ag gives you more options to wager than any place online and have been a staple in the gambling industry for over 20 years. You can get in on their season opening bonuses today and start off wagering on wins, divisions, and championship futures today. Head over to betonline.ag today and take advantage of all their great sign-up bonuses. And please don't forget to use code CLNS50. That's CLNS50. betonline.ag, your online wagering experts.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. And we have a jam-packed agenda, so we'll get right at it. And I know, Heather, you like Torrey Krug, so we'll start with him. Reports are out that the Bruins have offered 6 years and about $6.5 million per year. I actually thought that was a better deal than I thought they'd bring to the table. Do you feel that's a fair deal?
I do feel that it is a fair deal. Even with Torrey, again, older people, I don't really want them to have longer than 5 years. I don't like it. I think it's very fair. I do think it still undersells a little bit. And that's just to go back to what we've talked about before, about how he took all the smaller short-term deals so people could get their money. So I'm a little surprised maybe they couldn't have made it a solid 7. You know what I mean? Probably would have been a little more appealing, because that is walking at a back from the $8 million. He probably will get signed somewhere else. I think it was certainly a fair deal. I think it's interesting, though, there has been no movement on the Krug front. So I'm not wondering if he's not revisiting that and they're not, I don't know. But I definitely think that it was a fair deal. But I do think when we keep talking about this, given his circumstance, he has to make money. And as much as he loves being here, that is underselling him a little bit, I just surprised with that part, but yeah, definitely fair. I don't think that the Bruins short sold them more than they really probably can. You know what I mean? Because they don't have money.
For me on this topic, it was it was interesting because it just seems like Don Sweeney and the Bruins are trying to create that culture of let's do something cap friendly and be a part of something moving forward. And he did it with Pasternak, and he did it with other members of this team. I can't think of anybody right now, but it just seems like that's what they're trying to do. Not sure what's going to happen when each side gets pushed into a corner. It does look like Torrey's going to walk to at least field some of these offers on the open market, but in this type of Bruins management moving forward and having these short money, longer kind of deals and the flexibility to have cap space right around the trade deadline is things that probably we're going to see more and more often. But unfortunately, I don't want to see players like that walking either. So for me, I'm totally on the fence with if he's here or not. But it sucks that he's probably not going to be involved shortly. So
I think it's a different. I think it's a little bit different situation with Krug because he's 30, and this is his big deal. Like this is it for him. And this, if you swing and miss on this one, you probably, miss out on some money. Pasternak, he's 21 when he makes that deal, whatever it was. Marchand had a deal that was friendly. He had bridge deals with Carlo and McAvoy, but they were young. So this sort of is a different situation for Krug, I think. So I don't blame him for going and trying to get as much money as he can. There was talk maybe that they would trade his rights to sign. I'm not sure if that'll come to fruition or not. And like Heather said, maybe the market with a flat cap and maybe some indecision on when the season will start and if there'll be fans and revenue, maybe teams won't offer him quite as much and maybe they revisit it. Who knows? But I thought it was a pretty good deal considering his age, his lack of size, the fact that he really isn't, in my opinion, a top pair defenseman. He's more of a power play specialist and a really good one, and maybe more of a second pair guy. But I thought it was interesting that they offered that much term and that much money to him, which it roughly was $40 million invested in him. I thought that was more than they would have. So they must like him. It's just that I think that right now they're just trying to avoid overspending and trying to get out of that deal later. But free agency opens October 9th. So this is sort of a big deal for the Bruins if they want to fill some holes, namely left shot defense, especially if Krug leaves. And also that second line winger position. I'll start with Mark. Who do you think, who would you like in a best case scenario to see in Bruins black and gold?
I definitely want to see a player that can come into this organization and address the 5-on-5 issues on point production that we're having right now. Create a little more of the secondary scoring, not putting so much pressure on the top line of Marchand, Bergeron, Pasternak. So, I really don't know. I kind of want that prototypical power forward that can be a nuisance, but also like a Brad Marchand type of, but a bigger forward and so on. I mean, you could field offers for like Kyle Palmieri. I think he'd fit really well in this organization and next to Krejci, the revolving door of that guy. But I don't know. I really haven't done much homework on who's available and so on. But would you take a chance on Taylor Hall and switch in DeBrusk on his off wing, which is not a great idea, but it's a possibility, or even put DeBrusk down if he's resigned, obviously, on the third line, left wing, and go from there. But it definitely has to be addressed, especially if you're in a win now model, which the Boston Bruins seem like they are. They're trying to get something done for the core players that were around in 2011. So that's a big concern for me, and it needs to be either a small patch or a long-term Band-Aid, but something's got to be done.
What about you, Heather?
I don't know. For me, it's always hard because, like, right now, I almost feel like with the cap situation, I'm more interested in, as painful as it might be, in to explore some of the trading options. That way we can kind of control the money flow by inheriting contracts that are already in, as opposed to setting up our whole new thing. I mean, you can see that even right now with Torrey Krug, right? He loves this place. They love him. Obviously, they are trying to find a sweet spot. I think both of them still want to, if they can make it work before the 9th. If not, I guess on Tuesday, we'll see probably some, rights being moved or something as part of packages. I don't know. That never came to fruition. So for me, I'd almost rather target those kind of things. I will always say, I think Kyle Palmieri would be excellent on this team. I thought that we were going to maybe go last year at like trade deadline. For me, it was Palmieri or Kreider. I think really would have made a huge difference. But even then, we didn't really have the money to move or whatever. I would be happy if we got Taylor Hall, not just because it would vindicate the fact I said take Hall instead of Sagan, but also, and I know we'll talk about him a little later, as much as I love Jack Eichel, he's a lot of money for a long, long time, where Taylor Hall, he's kind of at a part of his career now, right, that he needs to make money, but he also is looking to win and find a real home and not have this perpetual pit he's been in. Nothing against like Arizona, he tried to find home, whatever. I also would really like to maybe we have to replace defense a little bit, especially with Chara aging and whatever else. But I also don't want to overspend. Like I think I was saying last week, like, yeah, sure. Wouldn't I love Alex Pietrangelo, but do I need that much defenseman? He's older, would I rather have someone younger, like a Brendan Dillon, that's a little cheaper. So it is hard, but I really do feel like I'd rather maybe keep exploring this trade route option than so much free agency. Also, free agency is it's not the best free agent class we've had. Some years there's so many, and this year there's kind of here and then everybody else, which could actually work to their benefit. I don't know, Matt, what are you thinking? Is there anybody in particular you want to target?
Well, I like the Pietrangelo situation. I mean, he's a 30-year-old. He's sort of in the same situation as Krug. He's more of a two-way defenseman, more of the prototypical guy that you could put with McAvoy. Again, how much money it would cost, and I'm sort of with you on this, that you can manipulate the money a little bit better by trading so that you can save a little here and take a little more here, and maybe even have the team take on some money, as they have talked about with Ekman Larson with Arizona. So you can sort of manipulate and still stay in that good cap situation that way. Sometimes when you sign a big free agent, then it's a pretty big deal with and not really losing any salary on the other side. So you're taking on a big cap number. So he could be, if Jenny Dadonov is another one with Florida, free agent, 28 goals and 25 goals the last 3 years. So pretty consistent in the mid-20s. I think he'd be pretty dynamic with a David Krejci, or maybe even on the top line with Bergeron. But again, how much is a wing that scores in the high 20s per year cost? So that's another consideration. I don't really want to trade Brandon Carlo unless we're really getting someone in return that's a real game changer on the roster. The Bruins don't have a first round pick, which makes it difficult to really get a player in return and not have to give up people on your roster. I'd like to see Jake DeBrusk come back, but who knows how much he'll end up, what his market value really is and what he'll sit at. So I'm not sure if they'll go and get a big time free agent. I think they'll put their toe in the water and try to wait it out, and then maybe get someone a little cheaper than they thought because of the revenue ramifications and how the state of the league is right now. So it'll be interesting to see. It's just funny how we've heard a lot. Boy, we've heard an incredible amount of rumors and this is how it's going. And then it turns around and says, no, this is how it's going, but nothing has really happened. And it just leads me to believe that it may be a less exciting off season than we potentially think, but hopefully I'm wrong.
Just one touch one. I thought of another player that probably won't be like the dying need of right side production, but somebody that can complement very well. And I don't think he's going to be that expensive, but like a player like Tyler Toffoli could be explored too. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to be re-signed in Vancouver because of their cap situation and what's going on there with Jakob Markstrom and blah blah blah. So he's another player that continues to make rumors, even from back the last deadline, as I mentioned. So that bears watching, obviously.
In another team with cap ramifications is the Tampa Bay Lightning. Their division rival right now, and they have a situation now where they're going to have to probably trade a winger. And the winger that I heard was potentially Alex Killorn, who's an old a Harvard grad, old Harvard player. So has some New England ties, I guess. Has said he'd love to play in Boston and we didn't have any problems with it. So Alex Killorn is a guy in a trade package that could be had. I just wonder, and Heather, we could start with you. I just wonder if the Lightning and Bruins, who are really battling for Eastern Conference supremacy, whether or not they'd make a trade with each other.
I don't really think most teams will trade. It's one thing to trade within the conference, but within your division, like you're trying to beat Tampa. And yes, they have to give up something because they have for 10 years been just sucking in, trying to figure it out, They probably should be trade partners, you know what I mean? Because we have the kind of parts that will help them not totally fall apart. And they have some parts that we need to shore us up and make sure that, we don't go through the dumpster fire rebuild. We just kind of retool like we talked about. But I don't think realistically that makes sense. Not with two of the best, literally the top two teams, probably arguably in the whole entire, league. That seems ridiculous that they may be trading parts. But I would say never, because I have seen some crazy things this week going around in hockey Twitter land. So one would be surprised, but I would go with probably a hard no. It makes a lot more sense to trade with Arizona or Vancouver or Minnesota or somebody than it does to trade, or even Ottawa, like someone who's not competing with you. It's not, but that's just mine. I think that both teams would be hard pass,
Yeah, I mean, anything's possible for me. And I believe you wrote an article about this, Matt, on the blackandgoldhockey.com website that was either published yesterday or today. The guy's a workhorse.
Yeah, it was published yesterday on blackandgoldhockey.com. And I sort of looked into, because when I heard Alex Killorn's name, I thought, boy, I really like Killorn. And he's a left wing that would, you could put on a second line and, be productive. And he was a Harvard kid and all that. And his number was like in the under 5, I believe, 4.5 range, $1 million per year contract. So I thought that he might be a guy who would really be a good Bruin. And then I thought, well, they, the Lightning would take on maybe, a pick or maybe next year's pick or something in return. And I thought maybe they could be partners. Also, Mikhail Sergachev, who's an RFA and a good young defenseman, 22 years old. That was another guy that I thought, well, maybe the Bruins could make a deal to DeBrusk for Sergachev and maybe some other pieces to make it, if that's not something that would be fair to both teams, maybe throw in a couple pieces in there and maybe a guy like Sergachev would be good for the Bruins and maybe sign him at a decent number and move on with him. So I think you're right. I think it's sort of strange that we would consider it, but the parts are there to make some sense. So I don't know though that two of the elite teams battling each other would really take the risk to help one another, because if anybody fails that trade, then you're pretty likely to be beat out by that team next season. So we'll see what happens there. Next on the agenda was Jack Eichel, as Heather was just saying. And Eichel has a big number at $10 million per year, It was a big deal with the Sabres. It's been kind of a mess there. I mean, the Buffalo Sabres haven't been able to get out of their own way. Eichel is showing a lot of discontent. He's a BU guy, and there's been a connection to Boston. They've kicked the tires on it. I don't know if they can take on this type of salary right now without the Sabres taking some in return back to them. But maybe it's something that the year after they could explore when the Bruins are in a much better place even than they are now in cap. So I don't know, Mark, what is your take on Jack Eichel? And is that something that could be feasible? And would you throw all your chips in? Because that's what you'd be doing with someone like Jack Eichel.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting narrative that folks have explored. And, you know, whether they've kicked the tires or not, you know, the Bruins are in the business of making your team better and being competitive every year. So with that being said, I kind of take the angle of what has to go to Buffalo to accommodate a trade with, you know, a superstar like Jack Eichel and just seems to be getting better year by year with more experience. And in my opinion, I'd love to have him. Obviously, if there's a Krejci departure and somebody needs to come and play that second line center role, he'd be perfect for it. Or even the first line, drop Bergeron down. It all looks good on paper and everything like that. But when you look at that same piece of paper and you look at what's going back the other way, for me, that steps back in your willingness to compete year by year into the future, because you're giving a lot of the future away in a trade like that. And some people say it's worth the shot and so on, and you can replenish the draft pool at any time. But I like what we have in our youth, and honestly, if you think about it and you dissect it a little further, a trade like this for a player like that is going to want to get as much back on the other end. Like, you could definitely see a McAvoy involved in a trade like that. You could definitely see a Carlo involved in a trade like that. You know, it's that type of dynamic player that you're going to get, and it's going to cost. So I am on the fence of yeah, we do need scoring. We need to get better in 5-on-5, and he's a player that can definitely do something like that. But I'm also on the other side going, you know, we're taking steps back by wanting a big name player to address certain needs. But what are we doing by the year to year in the future with these assets going the other way?
What about Heather? Do you like Jack Eichel? Do you think that that's someone that the team should invest in, because you'd be paying a lot more than you're paying your current core?
I love Jack Eichel, but I don't love him enough to, even if they eat some of his contract, we're still back to that still $8 million or whatever that you have to. And I think I'm more worried because that is the trade situation in which I just personally, I cannot give up McAvoy or Carlo because they are the defensive future. You know what I mean? Like I said, and you could put Grzelcyk there maybe too. We'll see what remains to be seen with him. But like, you drafted them, you put them in so young because they were ready. You got to let them finish developing and be part, because they are your new veteran core going forward as the current veterans retire, right? I do think we also have a lot of things in the pipeline that, although some people might be sad if they leave, we could get rid of prospect talent too, because Buffalo is a crap show. Do you know what I mean? You could maybe even trade a lot of those things that are getting to the point where, like we always talk about, I know Mark and I have talked about, I'm sure you feel the same way, man. At some point you got to decide what you're doing, because we can't just have 355 centers, 975 right shot defensemen, whatever it is. So it is interesting that if you could maybe dump some of the baggage, you know, you're definitely not going to have any more patience for kind of thing into a package. And I mean, I don't want to give up Jake DeBrusk. I prefer he stays here, but someone who's important, but we might be able to bandage with what we already have, and they eat some Eichel. Now we're talking. I still think it's probably more practical. We could take a stab at Taylor Hall unless he doesn't want to play here. You know what I mean? That's just me. I don't think, and like Mark was saying, for me, it's like the long term, right? Unless you are sure this kid and Pasta and whoever can carry your team for the next 8-9 years, like Marchand, Bergeron, and them have been doing, it's not worth the risk, right?
I agree. I think you risk losing Charlie McAvoy either way. I think you either include him or you risk not being able to re-sign him, because let's face it, McAvoy is going to be your first $8 million player, probably. I mean, at least. I mean, he's going to make, especially if he has the type of season we think he will, with more increased offensive exposure and more power play time, and his numbers start to go up and he plays 28 minutes a game, then McAvoy is going to be a hot commodity when it comes up a year after next, when his contract comes up. So if you have Eichel on the books for a 10, even if it's 9, and they took some money, now you're looking at McAvoy at 8 or 9, and now you're putting yourself in a position where you're risking losing McAvoy if you haven't already traded him for Eichel. I mean, I really don't want to trade Carlo either, and that's the next item on our list. So I don't want to trade Carlo, but I would trade Carlo for like Eichel. I mean, Eichel is model of consistency at 36 goals last year. He's a point per game player in his career. He has like 337 out of 354 games. I mean, on a bad team with not a lot of great play. I mean, Kyle Okposo is this winger, I think. I mean, it's just not a great team, and they've had a lot of issues, like you said. But I would trade Carlo for someone like him. But I think I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I think you need another Brandon Carlo. I don't think you just need one. I think it would do them well to get a second guy like Carlo to put as in a third pair, and then try to go get a left shot defenseman. So, but I don't know. I don't know your thoughts on it, Mark, but I'm a big Carlo guy. I'm trying not to overrate him, and I feel like I am sometimes. He's not a great offensive production guy, but he is he's a steady guy on the back line, and he makes a pretty good number right now. He's probably going to be pretty affordable for the years to come. I don't know. I'm torn on Carlo.
Yeah, I am too, Matt, and that's a great topic to talk about, because the fact is that he's a valued asset that is going to be one of the two that are going to go the other way when you're thinking about youth and rebuilding and so on. When you take a player like Eichel out of the lineup, you want something in return, obviously, but you're basically taking away what you're trying to build more of, and that's to get a steady shutdown defense that can be still mobile, even though you might be losing a player like Krug and that mobility. But the way that Bruins fans seem to navigate to now is to get bigger and solidify that defensive zone better than it has been. So you're taking a player out and you're not creating anything for the future. And I don't see anything coming back the other way that's immediately going to impact like a Brandon Carlo did. I know he was pretty much a no-show in the playoffs. The team was a no-show in the playoffs. Let's put it that way. But his production, regardless of point production, he had a solid year. I thought he was a very good defenseman this year. Possibly, he was my candidate for the 7th player award, and then COVID hit. So I just don't want to take a big body away now and replace it with somebody that hasn't had time to know the chemistry and know the system and so on moving forwards. But that's just my opinion.
Heather, do you like Brandon Carlo, or do you overrate him like I do? Or I don't know.
I may definitely overrate him, but I do love Brandon Carlo, and I think has moments of brilliance, because I don't really expect offense from him. That's what I'm asking for Charlie McAvoy to do. I'm asking Brandon Carlo, and even though him and Krug were a total crap show during the playoffs, although not the only problem as people tried to make it like it was, generally they were your best pairing of defensemen, consistent all year long. You know what I mean? When it was messy, it was messy. But I agree with you in that, if I am having my team trade for someone like Eichel, I know I'm going to have to give up someone big. I just think that it's the forward group. We have to figure out how to kind of weed some of the people. Who can we dump, right? I mean, we have a lot of people and prospect. I'll give 8 of them up if that will save not giving up Brandon Carlo too. And then if I have to throw in a Bjork. I mean, I don't want to, I like Bjork, but someone like that, as opposed to giving up the back end, which really isn't that bad. Do you know what I mean? Part of our problem is our forwards also aren't really good on the check or like trying to control the situation sometimes, which is exactly what happened during the Tampa, right? Is that we couldn't control the neutral zone at all. Tampa was faster, even though we might have been equal. So, but for me, Brandon Carlo, like I said, I think him and McAvoy are the backbone of your new generation of Bruins. They represent the next stage. Yes, we might have to give them up, but I just don't think that. It's so weird because Buffalo's hard to think about because Buffalo needs everything. Like they have nothing, like I'm not saying nothing. I would Jeff Skinner. I mean, they have some people there, a couple Rasmuses. I don't know. Things are going on, but I really don't want Carlo to go. I feel like we have other things we could package. And even if it was a bigger package, I don't know. I guess I can't articulate what I'm saying, but I do understand it may be a necessary evil, but I'm more comfortable as much as it is like trading a Bjork or whatever than I am with trading a Carlo, because we have a million Bjork type players that we could either plug in if we need to, or it'll free up, maybe we can get something in return. I don't know.
I think, I mean, I think we're in agreement that Carlo, I like the fact that Carlo and McAvoy on your right side for the next whatever many years is a great thing. I mean, you can just sort of put them there and be done with it. And I think Carlo, when his after this year, when his contract is up, I think he'll make an affordable number because his offensive numbers aren't there. So typically you don't pay a ton of money for stay-at-home defenseman types. I just have to get around my head whether or not he's just a little bit better skating version of Adam McQuaid, or is he better than that? I mean, is he better? Because I don't know. I mean, because there's not a lot of. I mean, I don't know. I mean, McQuaid was very good at points when they made their cup runs and things. I mean, he was tough and he was durable and he was steady and he was stay at home. So I don't know if that's what Carlo is, or if Carlo can be a guy that continues to improve. So again, I don't know what the value is of him until maybe he's gone, or maybe you put him, or maybe he just signs somewhere else, or we'll see what the market is for him when his RFA rights come up. And so I don't know. It all depends, I guess, on what you would get in return. And I would do someone like Eichel, and that's an upper echelon type of player. But for just a lower level type, like for Ekman Larson or guys who have some question marks, to me, Eichel doesn't have any question marks. His only question mark is his price tag. So, some other lower level, second tier type guys that you're going to go get in the market, I don't know if Carlo's worth being in the package to trade for that. So, I guess we'll see what happens. There's actually one thing I wanted to ask you. It's not on the agenda, but I was just going to throw a little curveball, so don't kick me off the show. But is it possible? And you're going to think I'm crazy, but is it possible that Brad Marchand, if a team inquired about him and had an interesting trade proposal, that he could be someone off this roster that could be moved to sort of really change the makeup? Or is that just out of bounds?
Go ahead, Heather.
Wow, that's good. Yikes, man. Jeez.
I know. I just threw a curveball. I know.
It's a hard
but it
question.
seemed like he's not talked about at all. And I think that obviously Bergeron won't be and Pasternak won't be. Yeah. But I feel like Marchand at 33 years old, he makes a pretty decent number, like $6 million. I don't know if a team sort of inquired about that, or if you can make a trade of maybe you get a left shot D or something, or you get something in return, or I don't know. I mean, is it possible that they could explore that, or is this a guy who doesn't seem to be mentioned a whole lot?
I think that's interesting because, I mean, it's always Krejci, right? Everyone, because of his money and whatever, but that's a good point because Bergeron and Marchand, they all make around the same amount of money. It just depends on when you signed your deal so for all this person signed for this much. Yeah. Well, hello. It depends on the year. Right. But that's interesting. I have a hard time saying yes. I mean, anything's possible. Right. But Marchand for me is because he is the MVP of the team. He puts up, around 100 points a year, mostly, whatever, 80, like he's pretty consistent. He tends to get in trouble right before he scores his 30th goal or whatever of the season. But absolutely, the Bruins, if they said, hey man, we're asking about Brad Marchand, I can guarantee you, for as much as people like Brad Marchand, Ratty Marchand, would be all over that. And it would yield a huge return, way more than Brandon Carlo. Do you know what I mean? So that's an interesting idea. Now the Eichel Buffalo thing seems a little more interesting. But I would say that's probably not going to happen, but I agree with you. Why not? If we can be talking about Tuca and we can be talking about Krejci and we're talking about DeBrusque, Carlo, everyone on the planet, except for maybe Charlie McAvoy and the Ritchie brothers, because nobody wants to get them from us. That's interesting. Wow. I'm concerned about what the chemistry on our team would be if Marchand wasn't here, though. That's kind of a hard hit on that, but that's interesting. We could get a lot for Brad Marchand. Let's do it. Everyone else seems to be getting traded this week. Let's trade Marchand too.
Well, looking at Cap Friendly right now, I'm sorry, looking at puckpedia.com, good friends of ours over there. Marchand is 32 years old and he has 5 years left on his deal. There's a no movement clause, the first 2, and there's a modified, the last 3. Okay. And he comes in at $6.1 million UFA in 2025. Believe it or not, it's not crazy. It's not crazy to think about it, Matt. His value is probably very high right now. Every team in the NHL besides the Boston Bruins hates this guy, but if he's on your team, you're going to love him. He's that type of player that can just turn a franchise right around and say, I like this guy. So that 5 years that he has remaining on his contract is very enticing for another team that might be interested in making a move. But his age is always skeptic too. So he's on the other side of 30. We all know the narrative when we talk about aging forwards like that. But the price tag is very, very cap friendly for another team that's interested in possibly making a move. So, I'm a fence guy. You guys know that. I see value on the team and on the market. It's not a crazy idea, but it does bring up questions like Heather just said, but the chemistry. What's Bergie gonna do? I mean, Bergeron's got 2 years remaining on his contract, and both are modified no trades, and we're not even going to talk about getting rid of Bergie. So, I mean, it does raise a certain question, and good on you to bring it up. And I don't think you're crazy.
Well, I think it's when we're doing episode 305, I think that episode we'll probably be talking about when his no trade clause is modified. We may be exploring that again, when that comes up, when he's 34 or 35 and at 6.1, maybe down the road they do. I just think that his name is never really mentioned as someone who they are completely hands off. There's no way we would trade him. Or it's never really mentioned. His name's never really mentioned at all. And I just thought it's just sort of strange that at least it isn't mentioned as maybe a blockbuster-ish type of deal where you really change the makeup. And I get what you guys are saying. The chemistry is definitely, he's a big part of the team, obviously. And he's become more of a leader type. Even, in his earlier years, he was a little bit fly off the handle type of guy, but he's tempered that. And he's more of a leader type. And like you said, Bergie, what would he do in 2 years? You have Krejci wrapping up after this year, probably. So I don't know. It's an interesting thought, and I just never hear his name. And I just thought, and Sweeney said, we have to look at our whole roster and we have to explore all opportunities. And I didn't think Brandon Carlo's name would be out there, and it is. So I don't know. I wonder if someone would make a call. If I think Sweeney would listen, at least. So who knows?
That would buy you a first round draft pick.
Well, right. I mean, that could get you back in like high first round. But we'll see. I don't know. And I didn't think they'd really listen on Tuukka Rask, and that's the next item on the agenda. Is Tuukka Rask has been linked to Colorado as a team. I thought Colorado had a real chance to win the Cup this year. They're a very good dynamic offensive team. They really have a weak link sort of in the goaltending department. he has 1 year left on his deal. It could line up that they make one shot at it and they trade with Boston to take on Rask and see if they can make that run. And it's sort of been brought up with some steam behind it now. So I don't know. We can start with Heather. I mean, I would be open to trading Rask. The problem is, and I heard Evan Marinofsky say this on Twitter, I think, was that, you know, if you trade him, then you're not much of a contender anymore. I don't know how true that is, because I don't know how you'd replace him or who you replace him with. And goaltending can be a crapshoot when it comes to the postseason. Sometimes look at Hudobin, it's the hot guy. So I don't know. I would be open to trading Rask, especially with sort of his flighty personality and not knowing what you're going to get from him and not knowing if he's going to play beyond this year. And he's $7 million. So I don't know, Heather. How would you be open to that? I think I would.
I would be, although I agree you are probably taking a step back unless you're immediately replacing. I mean, Rask is Rask. He's, you know, a Venza finalist every year, whatever, everything. But I also do think for 1 year left, can they afford, especially say we have a shortened season, for a goaltender who he is an elite goaltender, but he does not play the amount of games that I know no one is the Curtis Josephs and the Marty Brodeurs and the Rawaz of the world anymore, but still, like, Bishop still plays like 70 games, you know, 60 if he's healthy. And there's a lot of goaltenders, Vasilevsky, you know. So I would definitely be, if we could figure out how to reasonably replace him so we don't collapse on the back end, especially with defense in transition, because we're not sure how that's going to work out. Absolutely, because that is a lot of salary that you could put towards a Jack Eichel or you know, whatever. I actually was thinking with Tuukka this week, everyone keeps bringing up Montreal for a place for DeBrusk, but Rangers are looking for a real goal. Like, you know, honestly, like for 1 year, yes, they got rid of Hunley. They needed that salary or whatever, but for 1 year to punch in for those other kids to get ready to take over, that's not a bad idea. Montreal, Carey Price, honestly, Carey Price. I keep thinking he's going to have his total meltdown Roy moment at any minute, because how can that guy be asked to stay there anymore and deal with that? You know, he's probably thinking, damn, I wish they'd release me. Like, you know what I mean? Kind of thing. It is interesting though, because Tuukka is an interesting character because he's kind of like Marchand. Like, would other teams be skeptical to take him on because of his personality? Do you know what I mean? Like, because he is only going to probably give you 45 games of the 82. And for whatever reason, you know, and I try to not be too hard on whatever. Some people, just personalities are different, right? I absolutely would be open if that means it would lead to, like, again, for a blockbuster trade, like you were saying, with a, you know, you got to have a blockbuster trade involved with that if it was a Marchand or whatever. So it's interesting though, because everybody kind of could use a Tuukka Rask for a goaltender, right? But so who would we want to try and pick from, right? That goes back to maybe that's Vancouver is actually a trading partner for us, right? Depending on what happens with Markstrom, you know, so I don't know. It's interesting, but I would definitely entertain it. Sorry about the tangent, boys. And it's, you know how it gets.
Yeah. I'm on, if that needs to be done and explored to free up cap space and make the team better, I'm all on board. So it's not that I don't like Tuukka and what he's done in this organization. He's been a solid member, and his numbers just proves it when you look on the stat sheet. For me, talking about Colorado is intriguing because of the ask back, and I've heard as far as Zadornov and Tyson Jost. So I believe both of them are defensemen. So it's not a bad return on the back end. But when you think about a trade like that, you also have to think about players that are your seventh and eighth defenseman on your team, like Connor Clifton, Jeremy Lauzon, these guys that are trying to stay in the lineup consecutively. Those guys are now expendable when you get two defensemen coming in. And, you know, these guys got to be playing all the time. And to do that, they would have to go to Providence to play. And I talked about it on the Sportscaster live stream last night. You know, a guy like Clifton is waiver eligible. So I mean, he's on a $1 million deal, very team friendly. Anybody's going to want to pick him up. They're not going to let him go right down to Providence. I don't know about Lauzon. I think he's still on an entry level deal. I don't think he's reached the pinnacle yet of him being eligible for the waiver process. So he could be one that goes down if something like that happens. So there's a lot of ways to think about a trade like this and what you're going to get back. I know they're not going to do McKinnon's, and they're not going to do anything crazy. If you're going to get McKinnon, guess what's going the other way? McAvoy or Carlo. So it's the cap number too. Think about it as a business. That's $7 million off your AAV to address other needs on this team, regardless. And I think that a move like this needs to facilitate a forward and a defenseman. I don't know if bringing 2 defensemen back is the greatest idea, but that's just me.
I've been a Rask fan from the get-go. I think he's sort of misunderstood here. I think he gets unfairly treated, but from not winning a cup. I think in 2013, Game 6 was unfortunate against the Blackhawks, and in 2019, I think if Marcus Johansson scores on a really nice opportunity in front of the net, maybe it's a different game. In Game 7, it's just one of those things. Again, hockey, sometimes there's some luck involved, and it just doesn't work out for you. But he's a Vezina candidate even this year. He's second in the running. He only makes $7 million as compared to Carey Price at $10 million, Vasilevsky at $9.5 million. So it's not that bad of a deal for a team taking it on. I just worry about his focus and whether or not he really wants to play, to play at a high level, his concentration level. I worry about those things. I worry about, is he 1 foot out the door when it comes to, I'm going to retire anyway next year. I don't know if you can really get him 100% committed. So those are the things that I worry about. You have an issue after next year when Rask and Halak are both up. Their contracts are both up. So you have the young kids. So if you got someone else, let's say you got a Darcy Kemper who makes about 4.5, and he was on the books for a couple of years, that would give you a little bit of a bridge for the young kids. And you could say, like you said, the $7 million, you'd save about $2.5 million there. So maybe that would be a play. Maybe you could get a 1st-round pick from Colorado because they're picking down the board. Maybe they're trying to make a run. They can afford to give up a 1st-round pick and maybe a Jost or someone, a younger player, a defenseman, and maybe you do that. I think the Bruins are open to it. Don Sweeney said before he had no reservations about Rask coming back or his commitment level. I think that's probably untrue. I think there are some reservations, and I think they are open to trading him. And I think it would be a pretty good move depending on the return and depending on how you filled, because you can't have Halak play the whole year. He's a good backup, but you can't have him play the whole year. He can't be your number 1 goalie. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with Rask going forward. And then right around draft time here, I think if Rask is traded, I think he's traded tomorrow. I think he's traded before the draft so they can, because I think a 1st-round pick is probably involved in that somehow. But I guess we'll see how it goes with Tuukka. Another team that is willing to give up their 1st-round pick are the Montreal Canadiens. And, they're really looking, they were really sort of a surprise. They were able to play well in the postseason. They got in there by sort of a stroke of luck, but then they performed pretty well, and they've made some strides from being a pretty poor team to actually improving some. And now I think they see a window of maybe getting even better. So they're looking to deal their 1st-round pick. The Bruins are not in the 1st round. So here's another scenario. Do you think that Boston and Montreal will come together with a trade, potentially sending DeBrusk maybe to Montreal? I think I might pass in my Bruins membership card if that were to happen. But I'll get your take, Mark, on this.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. We do need to get back in the 1st round and so on, but is it? I don't know. I don't. Trading with Montreal is so tough and so on, but Bergevin, and I know I said that wrong, but I'm doing that on purpose. He really loves to throw things out there and see if they stick. But if that's true, I I'd like to see a little more back in a trade for DeBrusk. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to get back in the first round, but I'm not sure to that extent.
Heather, can you deal with the Montreal Canadiens, or are you like me? You don't want anything to do with them. You don't want to give them a young player like Jake DeBrusk so he can score 40 goals and beat the Bruins, 6 times a year.
I feel dirty thinking about it.
Yeah.
I can't. I don't want Jake DeBrusk to have to go to a team. He doesn't speak French. That's going to be an issue. No, I don't know. He could speak French. I'm just saying. No, that's just, it goes against the laws of nature, man. I mean, I'm not saying business side of it. Yes, it makes sense. Just like when you talked about Tampa, absolutely. I wouldn't be sad if Alex Killorn was, whatever. Killorn's on our team or whatever, but no, not Montreal, not Boston ever. Isn't that part of it's like rule number 1, there is no fight club. Rule number 2, there is no fight club. Rule number 1, no, never date within the division and never date a Montreal Canadiens fan. It's just wrong. I can't. If DeBrusk isn't going to be here, it just also Montreal, part of their problem is they're so young. So you don't want Jake DeBrusk to be your veteran on your team, right? Because he happens to be 24 and has been playing since he was young. That's weird too. I feel like they're too forward heavy as it is. But I did say that they were going to get in. No one to listen to me. I was like, Montreal's going to play themselves into the actual thing. And that's insane. But no, that's gross. But I mean, this is an organization who he had to explain that the interim coach, after their coach had a heart attack, didn't speak French. So bear with him. Jesus, I don't want to drop DeBrusk in that environment. But speaking of environment, sorry to circle back just a little bit though, with trades, whatever with Eichel is, I don't know how Eichel would do too well in this pressure cooker. DeBrusk has been in Boston, which is kind of similar to Montreal or Toronto with the pressure cooker of the press, right? So he'll probably handle it. What about some of these players who we trade with? We don't know they're not going to crack under the Boston. Just so you know, you're going to suck always, no matter what you do. I mean, Tuukka Rask is the most winning goaltender in Bruins history, yet he is the suckiest goaltender we ever had, if you listen to most Bruins fans on most days. So that's just something to think of. So DeBrusk, I don't want him in that environment. You know what I mean? He's been trained to be in a competitive media kind of savvy place. And that's just me. Sorry. I just thought of that. When we're
it's a valid point. It's something that we don't really, sometimes we just don't think sometimes, I don't know, we just don't think we're dealing with human beings. We just think, yeah, send this guy over there and this guy over here, and it'll be fine. Or the stats will work out. And sometimes it's a very real thing, being able to play here or not. Jimmy Hayes couldn't do it. I mean, Jimmy Hayes was a local kid who really cracked under the pressure. And once it started to go south for him, he could never get it back. And it was a disaster. And and the Bruins traded Riley Smith, who's doing great things with Vegas. And it was a poor trade. It's one of the worst trades, under the radar, worst trades they've made in a while. And Jimmy Hayes just couldn't do it. I mean, there are guys who have come here in all sports, really cracked under the pressure, listened to sports radio and getting hammered by plumbers and electricians and watching the games. And it drives you crazy if you let it. And some guys thrive. I mean, Charlie Coyle has been tremendous, a Weymouth kid who really loves playing for his hometown team, loves the pressure, loves being close to home. And he is really, Chris Wagner's done a good job, from Walpole. Matty Grizzlick's been good from Charlestown. I mean, there's been local guys who know the pressure and can handle it, but there has even been local guys who've come here and haven't been able to do it. And it's a real issue. It's a real thing. And I always wonder if you get a high price guy like, Ekman Larsson, if he comes over, and the jury's out on just what type of player he is. And who knows, you could come here and just not play well. And now you've invested so much that Bruins fans expect even more from you. So now if you don't bring it, now they're going to kill you. I mean, they're going to hammer you. So, and can you take that? And that's a real consideration when you're making trades. I mean, Rask has had a hard time, and he's been a Vezina level goalie. He's done extremely well. He could go down as the best goalie they've ever had, and he still gets destroyed by the fans and some of the media all the time as being, not a winner and and let you down in the end and this type of thing. So I agree. And I don't know, Mark, what is your take? I think that we don't consider it enough, and I don't think the teams do either. So that's certainly a concern though.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know where to go with this one. It's a lot to unpack, Matt. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard because I think if you bring a guy over who you have a lot of money into, or if you sign a guy, let's say you sign Taylor Hall, and Taylor Hall has been good, and he's also been the number 1 overall pick, so there are high expectations. Probably hasn't reached them 100%. Now he comes here with some question marks. And is he a Bruins type of player? I've talked about this before with David Krejci. He's like the only non-Bruins type of player that's played, several years with the team. Typically they get run out of town, or the team gets fed up with them, or they don't fit the Bruins style. So not only is there the Bruins style, but there's also the Boston media thing. And it's a concern, or it should be more of a concern. And I don't even think about it enough, but it should be more of a concern when you're dealing with high-priced free agents, or you're dealing with contracts you're bringing over that could really hamstring you if it doesn't work out. And I think it's hard.
Yeah, and either if you're drafting a player that you want in your organization, or you're trading for a player that you want to get better in certain areas, the character aspect of being the human aspect, is so important, and how that player is going to adjust. You want to get the feel outs there of how is he in the locker room, how is he as an individual, and this and that. So there's so many areas that you can address when looking at this. And obviously we talked about Charlie Coyle. I mean, I was not a big fan of this deal, and it wasn't because of the fact is that Ryan Donato went the other way. It was his inconsistencies in scoring were a huge factor for me and a red flag for me. But I'm glad that he has taken that to a higher level and came into Boston and really worked hard. His puck possession that I didn't see in Minnesota all the time is blatantly right in front of me now. And I was like, wow, there's a reason why we got this guy. So, that's the whole thing. Is it's so risky nowadays with everything that you do when you're trying to make a very competitive team like this Boston Bruins team has been in recent history.
Well, that actually brings up Ryan Donato was another kid. I mean, he was his father played here, was a decent player, local guy, and he had some struggles, and they ended up trading him for Charlie Coyle, and it worked out. And now I hear that Minnesota is looking to move on from him again. So
San Jose is interested.
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't work out, and it's hard to get back once it starts to go. I mean, I felt terrible for Jimmy Hayes because I thought at the time, big kid, local kid, he might do some things for us, and it just wasn't a good fit at all. And it was too bad because he's playing in his backyard, and it wasn't working out. It must have been really difficult for him, and I think it's a consideration you have to make. So
absolutely.
Well, we are at the 1 hour mark or so
we can go a little further because we do have a guest. But I just want to jump in real quick. I did find a This Week in Boston Bruins History.
Nice.
So I went on the online while you guys were chatting away. This week, today is the 4th. So on October 7th in 1995, Boston's Fleet Center opens. So the new arena, we talked about the old Boston Garden last week. So this week we're talking about the new facility that was built and opened in 1995. The New York Rangers and Boston Bruins played in that game, and they tied at 4. Remember ties?
Yes, I miss them sometimes.
Jeez, I can't believe that. But so that's This Week in Boston Bruins History. Hopefully we'll get some more and do these in the future because I like these little history pieces and so on. It's interesting. And what I want to do is I want to do it for the week of the show. So I don't want to go in the back. I want to go ahead. So as the listeners throughout the week can figure it out that, this happened. So,
it's really hard to believe 25 years. I mean, goes by fast, but 25 years, it doesn't feel like it was that much long ago. I thought that when it first opened, it was kind of a bland sort of arena. I do like that they've gone to black seats, and I thought the yellow seats it looked like if three of you went to the bathroom, it looked like it was half empty. It was just it was like
No shit.
but the black seats I think really look sharp, and they've made some nice changes to the concourse and that sort of thing. And my dad's an usher at the Garden, so they've made some nice additions even since he's been there 12 years or so. And I miss the old Garden, and I miss the atmosphere. I miss that it was just, I mean, it wasn't a great looking place aesthetically, but it was such a great place for hockey.
Fun fact, you were talking about when three people go to the bathroom, it looks empty. They actually, do you remember the black and yellow seats?
Yeah.
Okay. The reason for that is because of the eye perception.
Oh.
Is if somebody did go up, and this was when the Bruins weren't very good and they were trying to make the lower bowl more, full, but they would purposely make that seat black to make it look like it was occupied.
Wow, that is because it really does make a difference. Because when I would see it, I'd say, boy, it looks like it's empty. But especially a 7:00 start on a Tuesday night or something, and people aren't there yet, and it just looked bad, and it didn't look so great. But I think they've made some nice changes to it. I just miss the old Garden. So
I would like to just remind everyone it was called the Fleet Center, not the Boston Garden, when it actually was supposed to be the Shawmut Center. Then they got bought by Fleet. Then it was the Fleet Center. It wasn't even the Garden. I remember being pissed that it wasn't going to be the Garden. Right. And just like I get mad when it's like TD Big. No, just remember when stadiums and stuff just had a name, like, whatever. Yeah. Boston Bruins Garden or whatever, all the marketing. But I was so mad. But the first time I ever was in, it wasn't even a hockey game. It was at some conference thing, and we were right under the scoreboard on the floor. And I remember it's giant because the old Garden was so small, and I'm like, you can see everywhere. This is weird. There's no poles blocking your sight. This is stupid. I'm not even there. But yeah, that 25 years, man. Things happen. Stuff happens. A lot of stuff has happened.
How many Ask B&Gs do we have?
We have 2 that I saw when last I checked.
All right. Let me, why don't we start off with that?
All right, gentlemen. So Ray Guarino at Ray Guarino wrote in, management talked about the disappointment in the fourth line this year, assuming Nordstrom is gone. How do you see it shaking out? I assume Frederick will be in the mix, but I also think that they will go outside the organization for help there. Thank you, Ray Guarino. Just want to make sure I'm saying it right, Ray.
Yeah. Yes. I don't know. It is. I want Frederick in the lineup. I like to see it. It remains to be seen what's going to happen to Sean Corrali with 1 year left. Could he be a trade chip? And if he moves, would Bruins fans? I don't know if I'm high on it, but you got to throw it out there, and you want to address a certain need. Would Joe Thornton return, and him centering the fourth line to possibly get him a championship before he hangs him up? It has been talked about and so on a little bit on the Twitter, but that could be an option to bolster up a little bit, get a big body in front of the net that big line needs. So just my opinion.
I really thought Thornton was coming here last year when the deadline. I really thought it was going to happen. Problem with putting Joe in a fourth line is that it's typically a grinding type line, and Joe's skills are probably better suited for a top 6 sort of situation. And I don't think you can put him there with his age and all the minutes he's played in his life. He's been a great player a long time. Really sad that they traded him and it didn't work out. They talk about a guy who didn't work out in Boston. That was a difficult situation with being in the first round overall pick, and Pat Burns didn't love him to begin with, and then it just never really seemed to be like he was beloved enough. And it turns out he won the Hart Trophy, and he's a Hall of Famer and just one of the great players of our generation, really. And I'd love to see him come back for a year. I just don't know if it's feasible to put him in the right spot for that. I actually wrote an article on blackandgoldhockey.com a little while back about fourth line and Trent Frederick. And I really like the prospects of having Frederick on a line with Corrali and Wagner. I think that could be a really good puck hunting type of line, forechecking, and even with a little bit of skill, a little bit of offense with Wagner and Corrali, who can score, double digit goals. So I kind of like the prospects of that. I'm not a Par Lindholm guy he has a year left. Nordstrom, I don't think is coming back. I don't see a scenario. Typically Bruins in the past few years anyway have gotten to a certain point with a fourth liner and then moved on from it. They did it with Tim Schaller, did it with Noah Lachari. There's a certain value I think they put on the fourth line. And when it gets to about $1.5 million or so, they don't really get to like $2 million or beyond with a fourth liner. They sort of plug and play right there. And I think it's going to happen again this year. And I think that Frederick should be the front runner, should be the lead guy, because I've heard great things about him. And Mark, you've mentioned his AHL season. He had really good. He showed really good things. So I like him, and I hope that he can be plugged in there in the fourth line.
I kind of think both. One, being objective and not just feeding into I don't think the Trent Frederick the way everybody else does, but realistically, the bottom, the fourth line, you really have to kind of have a cast of characters, to put in there. Like you said, we don't keep them long and we don't let their value get too long. So if the idea is like Frederick is eventually going to move up to the top 6, the people that believe in him think he'll eventually be moving up the chart and not staying down low. I do think you have to go outside though. And because again, sometimes we want players to be the players we want them to be. Like you were saying, do we imagine Brandon Carlo? Is it just in our own heads? So I think especially on your fourth line, you need options. Now, I don't want Par Lindholm to be an option. Every time he's on the ice, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot Par Lindholm's on this team. Like, I don't need those players. I do like the players like the Wagners or even Nordstrom, right? His price is too high. That's probably why he'll go. But I do think he's a candidate. If he was still only $1 million, you know what I mean? They would probably keep him because he does grind for them when nobody else is, kind of player. But I think you need to go outside too. But that is something that you might get in return in a trade situation or whatever if you're exploring. So not so much you go out and sign that kind of player. Obviously, it would make more sense to put Trent Frederick there. You know what I mean? But if in return you could get a decent person who could be a fourth liner, maybe on the third line, if you need someone on the right side, kind of, then great, have at it. You know what I mean? I think both ways. All right. So this is from Chase Wing, Elite 12 Sniper says, so 2 questions. Do you plan to draft to win right now or draft for the future and reload? Will you be drafting a goalie prospect? Also, why isn't Toy Krug re-signed? Thank you, Chase, for your question.
Yeah, the draft one that you always just try to replenish. You're not going to draft a player, especially with no first round pick, that's going to make an immediate impact. You're going to be selecting, or if Don Sweeney makes a deal and gets in there, there's a possibility. But generally, even if you're a Bruins draft pick, it's becoming more customary to spend one full season in the American Hockey League. They did it with Studnicka. They did it with DeBrusk. It seems to be working. And to get accustomed to the Bruins system, even though it's a different league down there, it's a developmental league, and you learn how the system works. So when you're brought up, it's not a shock to anybody. So, and to go on the goalie prospect, we talked about it. With Steve Kournianos, I think that this is a deal, a draft that they should address the goaltender and get him in the mix. Either the ones that I brought up with Steve, or even a college kid that still has time to stay in school and develop, but also you can time it to when his arrival to the NHL could be. So I just want to see somebody else involved. That's about it.
I think with the draft, picking 58th, I actually did some research on it. And guess who was picked 58th overall in 2011? That was Nikita Kucherov from Tampa Bay Lightning. So there's the one guy in the whole list I looked at that was actually, you could say, an upper echelon elite type of player. The second best player was like Yuri Hudler. And there were only four players ever picked 58th since 1979 to score at least 100 goals in their career. So it's not a great position to be in. Kucherov obviously is a great goal scorer and a great player in the league right now. But for every one of him, there's 50 other guys who really are just either fringe or don't really do much in the league. So it's going to take some advanced scouting from them to really pick someone at 58. I'd be intrigued to see if they jump into the first round. I guess it depends on how much they value what is really shaping up to be a wing-heavy draft with a lot of good offensive wingers, which they could use. I mean, everybody can use, but they could certainly use them. As far as goalie is concerned, they do have that issue after next year where both of their NHL goalies are unrestricted free agents. Rask may retire. I guess it all really depends on whether or not they trade Rask and they plant another goalie with term in the mix. If they do that, then maybe they do that and they address it next year or something. I think they could address it though, where Jeremy Swayman seems to be a guy with a really good upside. They really have to make a decision on Dan Vladar. It wasn't a good situation with him in the postseason. I'm hoping that's just a one-off, put him in a bad spot. And I'm hoping that he can actually be a pretty good NHL goalie, but you have to really sort of weigh the options there and see what you're going to get in maybe in 2 years from that pair. So
yeah,
I would assume that they will sign they will draft a goalie maybe later rounds, and I don't know what they're going to get. It is a wing heavy draft, as Steve has mentioned to us. So hopefully they can get a really good offensive winger with the 58th pick.
And actually, we should just why don't we just go right into that interview with the draft analyst, Steve Kournianos. We had a really good conversation with him. So before that, let's hear from the great folks at the storenextdoor.ca. Please go to the website and buy some of their stuff. It's awesome. It's used hockey sticks and gear made into like some really cool items, everyday items like Adirondack chairs and coffee tables and so on. But we'll be right back. And right after the Store Next Door ad, we're just going to go right into talking to Steve. So this is a great episode, and we thank him for coming on. He was really generous with his time. So we'll be right back.
A lot of people with disabilities that can't just go out and find a job. So we set out to create a business to fill those needs, one stick at a time. The Store Next Door gift shop is a Yarmouth-based manufacturer and retail outlet store. So we make great ideas that any of our employees come up with, and we reuse and recycle as much as possible. Our most popular item is probably our hockey furniture. We take broken hockey sticks and turn them into different products. We go through a lot of hockey sticks, a whole lot. Considering that it's only been a year and we're shipping internationally, I think that that's been a huge success. Most people's reactions are, wow, you do this here? We don't accept can't here. Everyone here learns in different ways, but we want to give everybody every opportunity to find exactly what works for them. There's nothing better than when a customer buys something and then one of our employees say, I made that. They have meaningful lives and build things they can be proud of and get a paycheck for it. I'm Amy Acker, and we change lives one job at a time.
Hey, Bruins fans, as mentioned in the program when we started, we do have a very big guest, and his name is Steve Kournianos. He is the draft analyst. You can find him on Twitter at the draft analyst. You can also follow his work at thedraftanalyst.com. He's on YouTube, and he's got the Draft Analyst podcast, which you can hear on Apple Podcasts and SoundCloud. And we have Steve on today to talk about the Bruins draft preview that he did on in episode 65 on September 6th of this year. So a lot of Bruins talk, a lot of draft talk, and we're hitting it right in a great time right now because the draft's starting on Tuesday night. But regardless, and I got to stop blabbing here, but to bring in our guest of honor, Mr. Steve Kournianos. How you doing, bud?
Good. How you guys doing today?
Excellent. Looking forward to talking some draft stuff with you. We listened to the episode 65 of the Draft Analyst several times to get names correct and get all the information, but psyched to have you on to talk about some of those folks, those players that potentially the next up and coming NHL players. So without further ado, let's start off with Heather, and she's going to go on a list of questions, and then we'll just go around the board.
All right, too easy.
All right. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Heather.
I know it's a very wing heavy draft this year. You had mentioned that, and about how the Bruins, we don't really draft for position necessarily, but I'm always interested in defensemen and maybe getting a little more depth in our system on that. So I just wanted to ask you about Luke Reed a little bit. He is an 01 kid. He's in the American development system. He's 6'1", 190 pounds. He's a right shot on defense, which we tend to be stockpiled on, but still, I played for Chicago last year, and you described him as a nimble skater with a calming presence under pressure. So I was just kind of wondering about this kid a little bit more, especially being an American kid in the system for Team USA.
Well, yeah, he's a really impressive prospect. The one thing that I liked about him is that he plays for the Chicago Steel in the USHL. And I went to Youngstown, Ohio a while back to see a couple of prospects. And this kid was on the ice for Chicago, and he's basically stole the show. And I'm like, all right, I guess I need to do my due diligence because I don't know who this kid is. And then I realized that he wasn't eligible for the draft. So I remember sending a tweet out like, hey, keep an eye on this kid in 2 years because he's a stud. And so basically what we've seen with him, we've seen him progress from like really his first year in the USHL. I think he was 16 years old up until this season where the Steel were the freaking powerhouse of powerhouses. They were just destroying everybody up and down that lineup. They rolled 4 lines. A lot of Bay State kids were there. Sean Farrell was one of the big scorers. Sam Colangelo. You're talking about, 2 potential top 40, top 50 picks. So Reed was like the power play quarterback, the number 1. Now, the other thing, though, is that Chicago's got this kid named Owen Power, and he's a big mobile defenseman who's expected to be potentially the first overall pick in next year's draft. And Power was, I guess you could say, the on-ice general, but Reed was like the calming presence. He was the guy that ate a lot of big minutes. He played for Team USA at the World Junior A Challenge. So he's a notable kid. I think he's going to North Dakota. But it's really his skating, his agility, I guess the read and the react, right? You don't want your defenseman to just stay in one spot and just kind of like look around and track the puck. You want him to take risks and make reads and step up, maybe intercept the pass and turn the other way. And at the same time, when they're breaking out, you don't want them to rush into decisions and force passes to covered guys and kind of like throw their partner or one of their forwards under the bus. Because a lot of young defensemen do that. They don't want to deal with the physical forecheck, and they just like kind of like get rid of the puck. And like, hey, you deal with this problem. So really a very high hockey IQ young man. I don't see him really being as a 4-year college kid. I think 3 years max is what you're looking at because he's going to go to North Dakota and he's just going to be a coach's dream. They're going to love coaching him. He's that good.
Well, that's good to hear too. It's always good. A teachable, skilled player is always good too. The other guy I wanted to ask you about is this Ruben Rafkin. He's a Finnish kid. He played for Windsor last year, but he's a little small. He's 5'11". I mean, I know everyone talks about how small our defenseman is, but 190. But he had pretty good numbers. He played 59 games. He had 4 goals, 27 assists. And you described him as like a Bruins type player. And I just didn't know, just some of the things I looked at. You talked about him, really like in breakout opportunities. He likes to pass, but he's not afraid to shoot either. And I just didn't know if you could tell us a little bit more about this Finnish kid that seems like, to me, like maybe Bruins type player, and describe what you mean by that.
Well, he's making me look silly because I ranked him, I think, in the high or the early 200s, and he left Windsor. He went back to Finland, and he's playing in the men's league there, I believe, for TPS Turku, which is a big time program, and he's off to a ridiculous start, scoring wise, everything. So usually with these import kids, when they come over from Europe, especially if they play in a place like the OHL, the USHL, there's always going to be a transition period, whether it be it's getting acclimated to the culture or the coaching style, the teammates, what have you. And so Windsor was a veteran-heavy team up front, and they had a couple of notable guys on defense. But what I love about Rafkin is that he plays a North American style. So he's 5'11", 190. but he hits like a truck. He's very, he's got very strong leg drive, lower body strength, but also upper body strength as well. So he could skate pretty well. Has a very hard shot. And what I love the most about him, to be honest with you, besides the skating, I guess, and the physicality, is his enthusiasm. This kid is genuinely very happy when his team scores a goal, whether he's involved in it or not. And to me, that's always been a big selling point because I like kids that actually care about the game and, really having fun out there at the same time. So, if you look at his point total, 31 points in 59 games in a high-scoring league like the OHL, it's actually pretty impressive considering he was not a top pairing guy. He was more of a middle pairing and on occasion played on the top power play unit. But again, he's very aggressive. He's always in motion. If he's on the puck, he'll look to make a move or two in the offensive zone. If he's off the puck defending, he'll look to make a big hit, but without really taking away from his positioning. So he's not like really that much of a roamer where he looks to hit people for the sake of hitting them. It's done with some calculations made beforehand. So, listen, he was second in rookie scoring amongst OHL defensemen. So he definitely has that potential to put up points. But again, like the physicality, the skating, the enthusiasm, plus the familiarity with North American hockey, I think he'd be a pretty good pick. I don't think he's going to be around in like the 6th to 7th round. He'll probably get drafted somewhere between rounds 3 and 5.
Awesome. Thanks.
Matt?
Hi, Steve. Thanks for coming on the podcast. So I really took a look at when you were talking on your podcast about Brett Berard, and I really sort of dug in a little bit about him. He's 5'9", 160, sort of small and slight, but he had his game sort of modeled after Brad Marchand. And I really sort of thought that maybe the Bruins could look to him to sort of recreate a Marchand type of player. He's committed to Providence College, but I was wondering what you thought of him possibly at 58.
Listen, size isn't that big of a deal anymore, at least in the last couple of drafts. So you're going to see teams more than willing to draft smaller types, especially if they have that high compete level, that battle level, where they show a willingness to do the stuff that you really need to succeed in the NHL. And I'm pro analytics. I understand that they're a tool and they can be essential, but you need guys to go to the net. You need guys to go into the corners. You need guys to be willing to take a hit to move the puck. And so when I watched Berard play, I watched him play a ton. I saw a kid who just was so confident when he collects the puck. He's got a lot of speed, so you could consider him that playmaker, that setup guy. So he has like a level of dynamism. But I think the first time I really watched him, what stood out was there was like a whistle scrum, and he just skated right into it. And he's amongst the trees, 5'9", 5'8" kid. And the defenseman were maybe like 6'1", 6'2", and he's shoving him, he's mushing him in the face. And I'm like, all right, I like this kid already. And then I found out that he's a Providence kid, so it made a little bit of sense. And then, of course, when he goes to Providence to play in that program, he's going to have to be tough. They demand hard work and commitment to the team, a team-first attitude. So I never got the sense that even though he's one of the top explosive talents on that team, the NTDP this year was more of a tight-checking, hard-nosed, physical group than the season prior where they were, the Jack Hugheses and the Trevor Zegrases who were flying all over the ice. And I thought that he fit really well into that system. And as the season progressed and he was able to distinguish himself against college kids, the NTDP, the first half of their schedule was loaded with college opponents. And we're talking BUs, Michigans, Minnesotas, and North Dakotas. And he was able to hold his own. So the size is just really a number, in my opinion. I think that he's got the high-end potential. And the abrasiveness, if you ask him to dial it down, he'll dial it down. But I think he's well respected by his teammates. The coaching staff loved him. And it's just a matter of time before he's able to come to the NHL and drive people crazy.
Hey, Matt, I just want to jump in real quick right here. Is Providence College, is there any ties, Rhode Island to possibly Brian Berard in this player? That's not his dad, is it?
I mean, it made so much sense to think that, right? But apparently there's absolutely no connection whatsoever.
Okay.
I don't think there's any type of relationship. I mean, but I don't know if he went to Mount St. Charles, but I know that Barard, Rhode Island. Like you think of Brian Barard and but no, there's no relation. At least I don't think there is. So
all right, thanks, Steve.
Yeah.
Another player I looked at with a very high hockey IQ, from what I saw, was Emil Heinemann. And you talked about him also in your podcast. Dominated the Swedish Junior League, scored 26 goals in 29 games, 6'1", 185. Looks to be another one that I think that the Bruins could target.
Yeah, he is. If you want to call him a late bloomer, you call him a late bloomer. Usually when kids are not earmarked for the national programs at the 16 and 17-year-old level, then you got to consider them a sleeper, at least on your watch list. And he exploded right off the bat. He played with a center named Nils Aman, who was a double overage, born in 2000. So he had the benefit of playing with an experienced setup guy. But as the season progressed, I noticed that Heinemann was very low maintenance. And I saw Chris Kreider moments. And I'm not saying in a sense that, he's going to be a Chris Kreider, but the exploding down the left wing and just ripping pucks on net, having that inside step on the defenseman, no matter how fast that defenseman may be. And so I saw that during the season. The thing about Sweden is their defensemen are pretty mobile. They don't have a whole lot of like big lumbering 6'4", 225 stay-at-home types. Swedish defensemen tend to be very agile and quick. And although they tend to leave a lot of room at the line to allow those clean zone entries, they usually have pretty good catch-up speed and react really well or adjust their speed when back skating. And they had a tough time with Heinemann doing it. So when I guess the Swedes took notice and invited him to a tournament, the U19 Five Nations, which took part in Germany. It's kind of like a mid-level tournament. There's really not a whole lot of notable names there. And I think they created that tournament to allow these, less than notable kids who are on the draft radar to play. So you rarely see superstar prospect types playing it. And it's just European teams. And he went there and he freaking dominated it. He was absolutely dominant. They couldn't slow him down. So he's got the combination of the speed, the size, and the shot. I mean, what more could you want out of a goal-scoring winger? And the IQ played into it because he wasn't just like a bull in a china shop. He was calculated. He noticed when he was kind of sealed off or was about to be sealed off. He'd peel back high at the line and maybe wait for puck support to arrive. And that's hockey sense, hockey IQ, not rushing into decisions or putting your teammates in a bad position. And in this day and age, giving up possession, if you're going to do so, let it be a critical situation where you really have to give up possession to prevent the other team from hurting you. But you see a lot of kids nowadays, they just do it just to get rid of the puck. And we see it at the NHL level as well. Well, a kid like Heinemann rarely does that. If he does it, it'll be a chip and chase, and he'll use his physicality and really bear down on that defender and make life difficult for him.
One other player I looked at, and it might be a little bit of a stab in the dark, a little bit of a reach. The Bruins have been known to reach Zach Senyshyn in 2015, but I looked at Blake Biandi, and I looked at his numbers as a Minnesota high school hockey kid, Mr. Hockey Minnesota, 175 points in 75 high school games. Has all the offensive tools. The big question mark was the competition level. But I wonder if, and I've seen him anywhere from maybe third to out of the draft. So yeah. I'm thinking maybe later, maybe fifth or somewhere around there, maybe take a shot at a Biandi and see what the potential is there.
Yeah, I'm higher on Blake Biandi than most. I'll admit it. Sometimes when you watch a kid for the first time and he puts on a show, you kind of get, all right, he's got my attention. And then if you watch him the second and third and fourth time, then you're like, all right, well, every time I've watched him, whether it be at the international level or at the high school level, he's definitely been impressive. And I think he was invited to play he would have made the NTDP. And I believe he chose not to and returned to high school. And we all know, just like in Massachusetts, a lot of these kids in Minnesota, they like to win the state championship in high school. It's a big deal. It's almost like, World Juniors with Canadian kids. So I'll never shame or fault the kid for wanting to maybe take the easier road and not go to the USHL for a full season or not go to the NTDP and maybe stay with his boyhood friends and try to win a state championship. So his time in the USHL was a little bit up and down, albeit it was a small sample size. But what I loved about Biandi, especially during the state tournament, was the battle level, the intensity that he played with. And he's got a great shot. I'd say it's definitely his most impressive asset, that he could snipe it from just about anywhere. So you're looking at a center. Maybe he's got some work to do in other areas. No issues with his defensive play from an effort standpoint. He just needs to learn the technical stuff, the positioning, how to read and react properly. But again, dual threat, shoot, pass guy, good skater, I guess, and good size, really. I mean, was he about 6'1", 6 foot? So we'll see. I think I'm more bullish on him than most. So I would say realistically, I'd say somewhere between rounds 4 and 6 is where you'll find them.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. Great stuff.
And we are talking to Steve Kournianos, the draft analyst. Follow him on Twitter at the draft analyst. Steve, Heather mentioned something previously when she had her questions about the draft being winger heavy. Yeah. And the Boston Bruins have been trying in the past, like Matt said, with the Zach Senyshyn pick to possibly address the right side. So I gravitated to 2 players that you talked about on episode 65 of the Draft Analyst podcast. The first one is Maxim Groschev, and he plays, he's a versatile forward, as you know, left side, right side, 18-year-old Russian native, 6'2", 194 pounds, has played 55 games in the MHL, posted 10 goals, 15 assists, 25 points, played 45 games in the higher KHL, posting a goal, 7 assists, 8 points. Decent international career in the under-18 tournaments, and potential second-round selection in 2020. What are your thoughts on Mr. Groschev, Steve?
Yeah, he's really interesting. And I think I forgot which team podcast I did yesterday. I think they did like 6. But one of them I said how I look at what I rank him is somewhere in the 70s, and I keep saying, why am I ranking him this low? And this is just the result of watching 700-800 kids a year, where you're going to eventually have kids you're going to have to knock down. So I always viewed him as a potential first round pick, at least towards last year when he was playing for Russia at those international events, and also watching him in the MHL. I think what may have hurt him in the rankings was that he spent a huge chunk of time in the KHL, which is very rare for a Russian kid to do, a draft eligible kid. And so not that I was looking at stats. I'm just, you're watching the kid play. He's only playing 3 to 5 minutes a game, and it's usually sheltered minutes early in the first, second period. And then they kind of, cut his ice time down. I think the turning point for his season that really made him a notable player or a notable prospect to people that may not have been familiar with his game was the Super Series. And the Super Series is that tournament where the Russian World Junior team, or at least one of the teams that Russia would like to, create to send to the World Juniors, they play the all-star teams from each of the Canadian major junior leagues. So the Q, the Dub, and the O. And so he made that team, and he played so well, really dominating possessions, the stick handling, the puck protection, play along the wall. He's a heavy kid, but he's got an excellent wrist shot. So although he's not like an explosive skater, or really you'd call him a really above average straight line speed, he's got that deceptive agility and quickness in tight spaces. And because of his performance in that tournament, remember at the same time, the Russians had another U20 tournament playing in Europe. So I think the Russian federations used that, one U20 team on one side of the continent in Europe, the other one in North America. And then whoever the best players were, they'd kind of bring them together and say, that's going to be our World Junior team. Well, he made the World Junior team because of that performance. And even though he didn't play that much in the under 20 World Juniors later on in December, he really stood out. I guess just in that Super Series. And overall, I look at a kid that's just built for the North American game. He doesn't seem like he complains a whole lot. He just does whatever's told to him. He could fill a variety of roles, net front presence. He could be that playmaker and run the cycle or the weave in the offensive zone. So I'd say he's definitely more offensive inclined than defensive inclined. But again, the maturity, the fact that the KHL, his team in the KHL, all right, they're not that great, but they're willing to entrust a young man to play almost a full season with them, regardless of how many minutes he played. It says something about him. So the Bruins have been drafting out of Russia a lot lately, and would not be surprised at all if they're like, you know what, we need a winger. And he is a finisher, by the way. He's got an excellent shot. He's got great hands. He's able to take the puck strong to the net, finish, but you bury those rebounds, tip pucks in. So it's not like he's just this guy that stays along the wall and is on the periphery. He's an inside player, and he'll duke it out as well. So I would definitely call him like a typical North American style power winger.
The next guy, I'd like to address the right side as well, or the wing position, and that's Robbie Jarventi. And he's an 18-year-old Finnish native, 6'2", 185 pounds. Played a majority of last season on loan to the Kovi team in the Mestis, Finland, second tier men's league. With Kovi, he had 23 goals, 15 assists, 38 points in 36 games. He has a goal and an assist with 2 points for the Ives club in the top Finnish Liga league so far this season in 2 games played. So potential third-round selection for the Boston Bruins in 2020. Your thoughts, Steve?
Yeah, one of the best shots in the class, easily. This kid can bring it really from anywhere. He's got ideal size, no issues with movement. You could maybe critique his stride or the live long day away, but when you can shoot the puck the way that this kid can, who really cares? I mean, he knows how to get open, and he's not slow. So I don't want you to make it think that he's just sometimes some of these big body, the gangly types have an awkward stride, and sometimes that might turn scouts off. And some teams really just want their guys to be fast. But the fact that he was one of the top goal scorers in an adult league, granted it's Finland, so it's not like it's the AHL. It's probably going to be a huge difference when he gets here. But again, like, you can't ask for anything more from a kid like that. He actually outperformed and outproduced a lot of notable kids that played in the same league. So when you're one of the premier goal scorers and you have that elite shot release combination, it's accurate. He knows how to protect the puck. He's on the top power play. Really was a top line kid playing with, I believe his center was about 25, 26 years old, but he's low maintenance. It's not like he really needed the center to do all the work for him. So I got him ranked, I think, somewhere in the second round, maybe the third round. I forgot where I put him, but yeah, I mean, if he's available in the third round, late in the third round, you snatch him up. If you want to address a need, maybe you go for more of a high profile explosive type with speed with that first pick if you want, regardless of position. But if he's available late in the third round, you got to grab him.
Yeah. I watched a little bit of video on him, and it's quite impressive. And that shot that you mentioned is something else.
Yeah.
I want to bring in, because I'm a former goaltender, 30-year beer leaguer here, but goaltending is kind of my forte. But I believe that the Boston Bruins should address an addition to the goaltending depth, and I think this draft is one that could be beneficial for them to get somebody else in the fold. Now, we've seen in the past, especially 2015, when the Bruins picked Dan Vladar. He was the second highest ranked international goaltender, which spoke volumes. Came over here, and it's taken him 5 years to get to where he's at now. So, and the addition of Jeremy Swayman into the system too, and Kyle Kaiser, and so I think it's going to be important for them to address that need now and get somebody in the mix. And one goaltender I was really looking at, and some really solid numbers, big kid, is Nico Dawes. He's a 19-year-old Canadian-German dual citizen, 6'4", 203 pounds, saw over 1,000 shots, and he had 5 shutouts. He's a record of 23, 8, and 6 in 2019-20 with the Guelph Storm in the OHL. And in those 38 games, he had a 2.48 goals against and a .924 percentage. What do you think about that, and possibly him being available when the Bruins pick at the third round, and much like what they did with Vladar, and address that need?
Yeah, I like him a lot as a prospect. There's a couple things to consider. Number one, some outlets have him ranked near the first round. So now I'm not saying they're right or wrong, but and Central Scouting was very high on him as well. I think he was the first rated North American goalie. So when you're the top rated North American goalie, doesn't matter how old you are. I think when it comes to being an overager with the draft, I don't think it matters when it comes to the goal, because goalies take forever to develop. And so I think the team will say, well, you know what? I don't care the fact that he's going to be 20 years old soon. I think he's going to be 20 years old in December. It's that he's that far along. So that's the first thing to consider. The other thing is that the OHL was run and gun. It was the 80s this year. I think it was the highest combined goals per game the league has seen in something like 30 years. Almost, I think it was over or close to 8 combined goals a game. So you had like 11-7 games and 13-10 games. It was crazy. And so that really puts his numbers into context because Guelph was not a very good team. They were not very deep. They were, Peterborough. They were not, let's say, a team you would consider to be a OHL champion favorite or a Memorial Cup contender. And any success they had, it really all went back to Dawes. So when you're facing so many shots, I mean, he's stopping 30 or more shots in 24 of his 38 starts, and he had 4 games with at least 40 saves. He had 5 shutouts. I mean, a .924 save percentage in that league this past season is really impressive. So, he's a butterfly, stays deep in the net. He's very quick, but his quickness comes afterwards. He's not like jittery in the crease. I know with goalies, there's a lot of things that you could evaluate. He drops down the butterflies pretty clean. I think he uses more of an RVH than a VH. So you rarely see him get beat short side. He's a big kid, 6'4", so he covers that up a half when he's leaning against the post. So there's a lot of things to like about him. Love his puck tracking, love his anticipation. I would say his anticipation is almost on an Askarov level, Yaroslav Askarov level. And Askarov's going to be probably a top 10 pick. But again, maybe it's something that he's worked on over the last couple of seasons. And that's all you really want out of these goalie prospects is just show improvement every year. And then remember, Team Canada basically invited this kid to the World Juniors. I forgot if he was on the team, but I know that he played on the at the Super Series. And he actually was involved. He did play for the team. He was just really the backup to Hofer. So really, in terms of draft resumes are concerned, you can't ask for anything more. My concern as a Bruins fan is that he's gone by pick 58. But if you do want to adjust the goaltending, he'd be one of the guys I'd lean towards. Also a guy like Drew Comesso, maybe from a local standpoint. But I can understand why people are really high on Dawes. Very mature kid.
One more for the goaltender real quick. Brian Thompson, he's an 18-year-old Saskatchewan native, 6'4", 185 pounds. In 2019-20 with WHL Lethbridge Hurricanes, 16-7-1 in 30 games played, goals against with 283, sub 900 on the save percentage. But that's a big, heavy league out there. And we've seen goaltenders like Carter Hart come out of there and be successful in the NHL. So thoughts on his addition, possibly third or 5, 6, or 7 for the Bruins? Did we miss him?
Are you talking about Thompson? I'm
Yes.
sorry, he came in a little broken.
Yeah, Brian Thompson.
Yeah, the thing is, the one thing my concern with Thompson was that he played for a real stacked team. And so I understand that Central Scouting was pretty bullish on him, and he's got the ideal size, 6'4", 181. But that Lethbridge team was a freaking machine. And so it's not like he was the busiest guy in the world. But again, when you're looking at a kid who's relatively highly regarded, he played for Team Canada at some of those development camps. I'd call him, he's definitely more raw right now than most, I guess, draft eligible goalies. I think that he's never really had that defining moment where he stood out, whether it be in the postseason or in the regular season. So I didn't have him ranked. When I was ranking my goalies, I was thinking about it and I kind of left him off. But he was, I guess at some point he was highly regarded, and I just really don't think he's lived up to expectations just yet. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But he's just not one of my favorites. So I'm not going to, say that there are specific things he does that I found in his game that would make me want to rank him ahead of others. I think he's definitely more of a long-term project more so than the rest of the goalies in the class.
All right, let's circle around and go back to Heather. She's got a couple of questions about the National Development Program.
Yeah. I just was wondering how you obviously are really passionate about this and very knowledgeable. So since the NTDP was established in 1996 and the ADM was put into the youth hockey levels, in concordance 10 years later, we've produced out of their 81st round draft picks and a lot of World Junior medalists and all these things, including Jack Hughes last year, Austin Matthews and Patrick Kane, a lot of other ones. So I was just wondering with that, and also just with NCAA and even the USHL, like how have you seen it impact the landscape of developing talent here and allowing American players to still kind of still rank high in the drafting orders, even amongst all this international competition.
Yeah, excellent questions. Listen, the reality is this: we've caught up to Canada. I mean, that's the bottom line. We've caught up to Canada. The USHL had more players drafted than the OHL last year. I mean, that says something. A lot of us, I've been following the USHL for years. I mean, I used to subscribe to the newsletter. I forgot the name of it. Junior Hockey News, I think it was called, way back in the early 2000s. And so when I go back and I read some of those issues, none of those kids ever really went on to become anything outside of NCAA players. But now you're seeing the elite. And the thing is that those kids that are not making the NTDP, it's such a competitive camp, the multiple camps that they have, that you could almost make like a second NTDP, and that team would be just as good or competitive to, let's say, compete for a World Junior medal or a U18 medal. So it says a lot about what USA Hockey has done. Remember that the talent pool is growing. We have programs here in Nashville. We have programs in Dallas. We have programs in Tampa. The Southeast is full of hockey-crazed fans. We're getting kids drafted that were born and raised in Carolina. California as well. So I think that the fact that we have this NTDP, it's gotten to the point now where Canadians are saying, well, why don't we make a Canadian NTDP to kind of show the Americans we're better than them, because, we've given them problems the last few years, at least, it's kind of been even. But still, I think that what USA Hockey has done to not only create the program, but to allow these kids to come in, and they're not just doing it to, let's say, make money or make a name for themselves. They're really developing these kids to become NHL players. Yeah, they're going to go to college. They're going to get their degrees if they stay the 4 years or 3 years. But when they come to the NHL, they're ready. And if you talk to anyone, you talk to Eichel, Werenski, Pat Kane, all of them, they all say such great things about the program. And also just the USHL kids as well. The mentorship that they get is fantastic. And really, you rarely see kids from the USHL or NTDP that are, selfish, puck-hogging, have attitudes. It just seems like they do a really good job of picking the right kids for these programs, and it's reflecting the way that they're being drafted and what they're becoming in the NHL.
Yeah, real quick, back to Dan Bladar. He played for the Chicago Steel in the USHL, and when I interviewed him in, I believe, 2017 or 2018 at development camp, he spoke so highly of that program and that league. I think he was trying to transition into a college career, but it didn't work out, being selected in 2015 in the third round. But he just spoke so highly of that development scale. So it's definitely a solid tier 1 league moving forward.
I guess just more Bruins related too. I just wanted to know your thoughts on John Beecher, and obviously he was one of our picks last year. Yes. And going into this one, I just want to see what you've thought over the last year with watching him continue.
He was critical. He was critical to Michigan's rebound season. Michigan had a when you see the Michigan Wolverines not produce a quality team, and they had some issues, I think last year or 2 years ago. They brought in Beecher. They brought in Cam York, a couple other guys. And, I love John Beecher. He was a guy I had in the first round the whole entire season. And people ask me why. I'm like, you got to see the kid play. All right, he could be a little rambunctious, and he toes that line between dirty and undisciplined. But still, he was a top 6 guy. He's the guy that you have to kill all the penalties. He could play on the power play because he's got that tremendous shot, but also a big body. So you put him in front of the net. So Michigan did a really good job, and the goalie there had a lot to do with it as well. But he is not just a checking center. I think what happened with Beecher was they saw the NTDP and they saw Beecher on the 4th line with muckers and grinders, and automatically felt, well, he's a checker. Well, look who the centers were ahead of him on the depth chart: Alex Turcotte, Trevor Zegras, and Jack Hughes, and those are all top 10 picks. So I always felt that he had top 6 upside, more so than Trent Frederick. And I was a big Frederick fan when he played at the NTDP, but I always felt that Beecher, because of his speed, to be 6'3" or 6'4" and fly like that is very rare. So I really don't see him staying in Michigan all that long. If he wants to stay to get his degree, okay. But he's the kind of guy you want to get in Providence as soon as possible. And really much to the chagrin of the rest of the AHL, because he's going to mash some people.
Matt, you got anything?
No, that was all great information. I really have delved into the prospects more so than I have in years past. And it's funny, the Bruins don't even have a first round pick, but I feel like now talking with you and just doing the research that I'm really seeing, like Heather was saying, the tremendous amount of talent that's coming through, especially, in American hockey. And it's so good to see, because for years growing up as a kid, it was all about Canadian players and Russian players. And now we're seeing such, like you said, America has caught up, and it's great to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Steve, I want to touch on one player also that you probably saw in Youngstown and in the USHL, and that's forward Curtis Hall, currently playing for Yale University. Had a decent freshman year, but really stepped it up in his sophomore season before the COVID stopped everything. So thoughts on Curtis Hall moving forward?
One of the top sophomore centers in hockey. I mean, you can't really say it any other way. In college hockey, you can't say it any other way. I mean, Yale has been mediocre. They're mediocre every year. They've been mediocre, I think, for the last 20 years. And so they rarely have the kind of players that really they rarely have a real elite talent, I guess. And we always felt that Hall was a potential top 60 pick in his draft year, and he really took off. I mean, you got the size, you got the speed, you got the dual threat, the shooting and the playmaking. He's very good on faceoffs. I think he was one of the top faceoff guys in college this year. So he's basically a top line center as a sophomore. He's the guy that drives that offense, wearing down defensemen no matter how old they are, 21, 24, 6'5", 6'1". It doesn't matter. Like, he's a tough out, a very difficult guy to keep in check. We saw him play at the World Juniors. He did quite well there. So yeah, I mean, listen, the Bruins have an identity. They've always had an identity. You can't be a Boston Bruin and play in that town and be soft or be like on the periphery. And the one thing that really stands out about Hall, besides the size and the speed and the physicality that we've talked about, is his vision, his playmaking, that his ability to find people on the back door, to go across the seam, make plays from behind the net. So I'm not saying he's going to be a 60 or 70 point forward, but again, he checks pretty much every block that you'd want. And oh, by the way, he goes to a freaking Ivy League school. So I think that he was a great pick for the Bruins. It's always good to see your prospects progress, but he really took it to the next level. He's like, has to be considered one of the top 50 prospects in all of hockey, not just for the where he ranks in the Bruins or kids from that draft class. I think as of right now, he's got to be a guy the Bruins want to get in black and gold as soon as possible.
Yeah, it's kind of cool that his father played for the Providence Bruins too for a short time. So, and he follows me on Twitter, which is even better. So, if that's all we got for Steve, I think we're gonna end it right here, bud. I just want to say that you've been doing a fantastic job on the draft previews. You're doing all the teams, and it's been a great month, and you're killing it. It seems like I'm getting Apple Podcasts uploads all the time, and it's awesome. It's good listening at work, passes the time. But what do you got going on moving forward? And plug away anything.
Well, it's definitely not a non-standard draft year. So, the draft is in a couple of days. My draft report was finalized and went on sale about a month ago. And I appreciate you pushing it and everyone who've been giving me outstanding feedback. It's only $5. You can find it on the draftanalyst.com. It's got 376 scouting reports, and they are scouting reports. They're like about 2 paragraphs per player. It's 7 megabyte download. You go right to my website. You make a couple of clicks. It's through PayPal. And you'll get, it's going to help out. I would say, safe to say, at least maybe 175 of the kids drafted on Tuesday and Wednesday will be detailed in my report. So the other thing is the Draft Analyst podcast. I mean, I got about 3 or 4 more teams left to do, and then it's a wrap. And then on Tuesday and Wednesday on my YouTube channel, Prospect Film Room, I'm going to be doing a live stream. So you'll be getting pick-by-pick commentary from yours truly. I'll try not to curse. I can't guarantee that I won't curse. I won't act like a fan, because I've always said that I'm a fan first, always will be. And I get a little bit passionate about this, sometimes too passionate. But yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on. This is definitely one of my favorite podcasts. And listen, I told you this when we first spoke, that when growing up in Brooklyn, my cable system had WSBK. So I was watching Bruins games with Fred Cusick and Derek Sanderson. So I became a Bruins fan, and I could tell you any lineup of the Bruins from like maybe 85 or 86 onward. And then when I moved to Boston, all right, I wasn't as much a Bruins fan as it was when I was a kid. But still, I feel like I know a lot about the organization, and you guys do such a great job covering it. And, I know Bruins fans. All my friends are Bruins fans. I got family who are Bruins fans. And you guys definitely are the voice of Bruins Nation. So just keep up the great work. And I'm always available if you guys need me.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Steve. And everybody, please go to Twitter and follow him at the Draft Analyst. And this is a great time to get on board and tap into what Steve's knowledge and what he has to say about these kids that are potentially going to be NHL superstars in the future. So, Steve, thank you very much. Everybody, hopefully you've enjoyed this. Follow him, follow everybody, and we'll be back.
Thanks, guys.
All right, guys, that was an unbelievable podcast. This is episode 197. We had an awesome guest with Steve Kournianos lining up the draft that's going to be happening on Tuesday. So folks will have enough time to listen to this episode and be prepared for what could happen on Tuesday and Wednesday. But I just thought it was a really good episode. Matt, thank you very much for your first episode as the herder of the topics and so on. Heather, as always, thank you for everything that you do. I really thought we brought this one today, and I'm really proud. So we're going to have more guests on, and we're just going to try to keep knocking it out every week. So thoughts on the podcast and our journey forward. So let's hear it.
I thought it was great. That Steve is great. I mean, I learned so much. His knowledge is just incredible. The amount of research he's done, the amount of hockey he's watched at those levels is outstanding. And I learned a lot and have a different sort of perspective of what, teams are looking for, what type of players are out there, especially the American players and the all the strides American hockey has made. So I'm really looking forward to this draft because now I know some of the guys sort of late second round into the third round. And I've done that research and talked to Steve. So I'm really pleased about it. I think it was a really good episode, and he brought a lot to the table.
Oh yeah, I had lots of fun. Like I said, it's fun listening to him and really interesting because he's like a doctor of he's like a Rolodex. He has all these just players in his head and he can go through, but he can talk to you about it on a normal level without, he can talk to you about stats without going crazy lingo and things like that and really help you understand. So like Matt said, now I feel when I love watching the draft. That doesn't mean I know who everyone is. I'll go back and look after. Okay, number 12. What was that if I didn't know them? So it was great. I'd love to pick his brain again. Hopefully he'll come back on maybe after we have the draft while we're still in the off season, see kind of who we end up picking. But no, great podcast, gentlemen. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a great one. Please go and rate and review. Let's get back on that. We've had some good reviews recently. We'll try to get caught up on them possibly next week, possibly the weekend after. I do want to start pushing the Patreon, patreon.com/Black and Gold Hockey Podcast. Donate $1 per episode, and you will be eligible to be in our weekly giveaways that are starting soon. I'm thinking of the 1st of November, or try to get it towards where the NHL, I want to really find out when the NHL is actually going to start. And I'm hearing it could be January to mid-January. So I want to do the giveaways as close to the start of the season as possible, but we might even just start on November and go from November to November, a full year of giveaways, one every week. So I have all the stuff. We have signed pucks. We have Bruins, Black and Gold hockey merch, Fanatics stuff, hats, the store nextdoor.ca. We have stuff from them that we're going to be giving away. The Boston Pride, we have stuff from them we're going to be giving away. So it's just $1 per episode, and we probably do a max of 8, we'll say, but more or less it's going to be between the 4 and 8 number. So I want to thank all the listeners. The support has been outrageous. We have a brand new website at blackandgoldhockey.com. It's upgraded. We're getting a lot of good views. We're getting a lot of good traffic. It's unbelievable. And we have a bunch of really good writers, including my boy and the new guy here at Black and Gold, Matt Barry. So check them out. Check out all the writers. We have 26 guys. We have podcast network going on. We have a lot of good things that are happening. So jump on board. But anyway, I'm just going to end it. I know I'm taking over for Matt right now because he's the lead guy. But I do want to say thank you to everybody, all the support and so on. But we do have to end this episode now so I can get everything into a little 2-hour program. But speaking for Matt Barry and Heather Ingerson, my name is Mark Allred, founder and CEO of the Black and Gold Productions Sports Media Company. And we will talk to you next week. Bye.
Thanks again for listening to and supporting the Black and Gold Hockey Podcast. Please share the show with your friends and family, and don't forget to subscribe to and leave a 5-star rating for the show on your favorite podcast platforms such as Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and SoundCloud. Between shows, help us keep the Bruins talk going by visiting our website, blackandgoldhockey.com, by sending an email to blackandgoldhockeyblog@gmail.com, and by following the show on Twitter @blackandgoldpod.
Peace out.